Right, hello and welcome to our next edition of Scale Up Smarter. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kate Clark, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Rebecca Steer from Keystone Law. So Rebecca works in businesses on the legal side of AI, particularly around things like data use, ownership of outputs, and how to put the right governance in place as AI becomes part of everyday decision making. So Rebecca, firstly, welcome and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Start my morning with you.
Absolutely. No, it's fantastic to have you. I feel very, very honoured to have you on here. So we'll start off, AI is now, pretty much everywhere in business, but governance often isn't. What are you actually seeing in reality? Are businesses further ahead on AI than they are on managing the risks?
Yeah, I mean, some businesses are doing super well. I mean, you're absolutely right. Adoption is really running, and I don't think I know any clients that aren't using AI in some way, shape, or form across their business. But of course, some are have done a lot of due diligence around it and are proceeding very cautiously, and others, let's say, perhaps it's a little bit more chaotic. But it's not an easy thing to fully get your arms around in terms of how to govern AI because things are moving so quickly. But certainly yes, it's being adopted, and regardless of size and sector, really, we're seeing it being adopted across from the creative industries to more traditional tech businesses through to other sort of manufacturing, retail type businesses as well across all of their areas.
No, 100%. And in terms of, sort of the noise around AI regulation, what actually matters right now?
Well, from a regulation perspective, it's very fragmented. So it is quite difficult, I think, for business leaders to fully see, what they should be doing and what is coming down the track. It's also quite
Mm,
slightly difficult for us lawyers too. So
yeah.
so I mean, to give you the sort of high level picture, we don't have an AI Act here in the UK. We do have in the EU, so we have the EU AI Act. And in other sort of regions that I'm sure a number of your FDs and CFOs will be working with, that they'll also be looking at other regions such as the US, and we've got quite a spectrum of regulation at the moment. So here in the UK, we don't have one legislation that we can look to. We have a fragmented range of legislation, right from Copyright Designs and Patents Act, which is really old, but still kind of hits. We've got data regulation. We've got equalities issues to be thinking about as well. We've got cyber issues to be thinking about. And then a layer down from that, we've got kind of the governance that comes out from our local regulators, such as Ofcom, such as the Information Commissioner's Office, which have all got guidance, practice notes, etc., that we should be looking at. So those businesses that are in the UK, that's kind of the core focus where we are at the moment. The government has done and is continuing to do a number of consultations in this space around AI and its impact on copyright, around AI and its impact on cybersecurity, etc. And so, we're waiting to see whether it's going to legislate absolutely or whether it's just going to do piecemeal pieces of legislation, for example, around social media and children's use of social media and how AI platforms integrate with children. So there's lots going on, and it's a really difficult, I think, for businesses to keep abreast of all of that. It's almost easier if you're trading with the EU because carte blanche what you need to be doing, and obviously a number of businesses, particularly in the tech space, are going to need to comply with the EU Act anyway, because they'd be wanting to make their services or their technology available to customers in the EU. So it's a difficult thing to grapple with, and it's something that is definitely moving apace. So it's something that I think boards do need to be constantly reviewing.
Just quickly as an aside on that, with if any of our clients have got operations in the EU, can you just give us like the sort of the headline things that they should be aware of in terms of like the EU Act?
Well, I think the main thing is if they are providing an AI service of some kind to those customers. So it's less of an issue if you're thinking about using
Using
AI
it
within your
internally.
business over
Okay.
there, that they're the same local issues would apply as they would here in terms of IP, in terms of data, in terms of confidentiality, etc. It's more if you're building a system that could be used by customers in the EU that you have to bake in compliance. They have to consider what the risks are of harm and bake that into your design. So I would have thought that businesses that are doing that, so we've got clients that are building AI platforms and agents, and that is already part of their principle by
I know
design
it.
now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And obviously, Ultimus Clark, our focus is on the finance department. What do you think finance directors in particular and CFOs should be, watching over for the next year or so?
Well, I suppose, I mean, the creative part of me, sees the huge benefits from AI. So I think, it's great to see those businesses which are allowing adoption all the way through the business, from juniors right up to the top, to allow people to play, to learn, to train them so that they can be creative and innovate and start to feed up those ideas to the business so that actually some of the innovation that can be unlocked is unlocked. And then I suppose from that FD kind of board position needs to then be looking at the governance around how that is unlocked and what is the right return on investment for that, and all of those good finance things. So from a governance perspective, then I think it's really important to be assessing which AI tools are being used, and how they're going to be used, and whether they're the right ones. So actually doing, some audits on those tools, because they vary hugely, and we can come on to those in a minute. And then what data is being incorporated within those AI tools. So is it personal data from the HR team? Is it customer data? Is it proprietary IP in some way? And is that the right use of those AI tools to unlock those innovations? And then thinking about safe and sensible governance around that. And then also whether what you're generating out of it, what is that? Is it IP that you would like to keep proprietary? In which case, for example, if we've got tech businesses which are using AI tools to code now, or using AI tools to test code that's been built, is that code supposed to be proprietary in some way for the end customer or for the business? In which case, is that right now? Are we 100% confident that we will be owning the IP in that? Because we've got kind of a piece, and perhaps come on to talk about it because it's a bit of a technical piece about whether the IP that is generated in the outputs of AI tools, whether that is owned by that user or not. So for businesses to work out whether AI is the right tool to be using in coding in all situations, is another consideration. So yeah, they're probably the key ones. And then I suppose it's about return on investment, isn't it, as well? Because these tools aren't cheap when you start rolling them out, completely across businesses.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think one of my challenges with AI is, it's the fact that it can hallucinate, and it's not consistent with how it processes things. That's the bit that makes me nervous, in addition to, updating client, sort of uploading client data into
Yeah.
those platforms. That's the thing that, I will do it with my own data, and experiment with it, but I'm sort of reluctant, apart from Copilot, where I feel that it's kind of part of the Microsoft ecosystem.
Great. Yeah.
um I don't yet feel comfortable, uploading client data into, Claude, for example, or ChatGPT, because I know that it's ultimately being sent back to the servers back in America. So, what can I do? Do you know what I can do to get comfort over that?
Yeah, so there's a number of things, and you've hit the nail on the head in terms of a big risk area. So taking the hallucination piece first, I mean, I think that's about good training, because for sure it hallucinates all the time, and that's about businesses where considering where AI is being used in their operations, so that that they can manage that risk, and that there is a human checking somewhere in some way, shape, or form. And of course, in some places, it's just not appropriate to do it, because that it's actually just as it's just going to be, it's not going to save any more time, because a human is having to check things. But so I think that's the hallucination risk piece, and that is around training and around governance about where those tools are being used. In terms of risk of confidentiality breach, risk of using client data that perhaps you've not got the rights to do, so perhaps you've been given client data and you've got a contract in place with those clients to use that data, and it doesn't comfortably allow you to put it into an AI tool. That's something that, as part of good governance, we would be checking. And in that situation, if you feel you've got the rights, but it's still confidential data, then it's crucial that as part of your audit, in terms of checking which tools you're going to be allowing to be used within the business, those tools are set up in such a way that they are closed, so that they are not sending back data, so that they are a closed system, such that the prompt in each prompt you make, each chat you make, does not learn from the last, and equally that the data you upload, or that any of your users upload within your organization, is just kept in that closed group for your users. So exactly that, it's not trained, the models are not then trained on that data. And you can do that with enterprise versions of most tools, but not with all tools. So ChatGPT, you can pay for an enterprise version to do that. And us law firms, we've obviously secured that for specific legal AI tools which we're using. But I know a number of creative digital marketing PR agencies, there's a whole raft of AI tools that we've reviewed, many of them for those agencies, and a lot of them won't let you not train the model on your data that you upload. So it's really important to do that checking, and some of those tools should be ones that you choose not to use when you audit them, because they're potentially not appropriate, or the risk is too high.
So just to be clear, if you've got the enterprise version of ChatGPT, it automatically clicks that you're not training the model, or do you still have to go into settings?
You do still set, yeah, that's still part of your setting up, I believe.
You still have to go into the settings, yeah.
Yeah.
And do you happen to know with Claude whether, if you've got the enterprise version of that?
I think they're all similar. Those sort of Claude, ChatGPT are all similar in terms of the setup. You should be able to set them up in such a way that they won't train the model, and then there's usually a setting as well that means that they won't refer to the data that's put in with previous prompts. And that's important, for example, in a services business, where you may put in client data to ask one question and to prompt, and then you're putting in a different client's data into the next prompt, and you don't want the client data. So it's fine that it's all closed and it's not training the model, but equally within that, if you're talking about client A in one prompt, you don't want the prompt about client B next to be taking data from the output of client A. So there's kind of two sort of divisions there of risk that needs to be aligned. And for us, we would, the way our AI systems are set up is we then are actually able to tag those prompts to those clients, because obviously, you know, from a professional perspective, we have to keep files for clients, and we then tag those prompts to those clients. That's all filed away, so you know we can see what we've prompted about that client, about that matter, about that particular situation, should we need to in the future as well. So I think from a services business, professional services business, that's the level of detail that would be expected.
I was just thinking, like, certainly using ChatGPT, maybe if you set it up as a project, then it treats it differently anyway. I haven't experimented with that, but yeah, maybe that.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't experimented on a project basis, but I know it can be. I know the enterprise version can mean that it won't learn from your previous prompts. That's definitely one setting. It won't put that learning into the next chat. And equally, everything you put in won't train the overall ChatGPT model.
Okay. And in terms of sort of, I guess, ownership of like the AI generated content, you sort of touched on this briefly, but you know, who does actually own it? Or I guess it depends is going to be the answer, isn't it?
Well, it shouldn't be the answer because it's like a really crucial thing, isn't it? But we are in a little bit of a grey sort of technical area, I suppose. I mean, I think the good news is that I don't think I've read any T's and C's for any AI tools, and I've probably read at least 100 by now.
Wow.
Where the intention is that the output that is generated from your prompts, the output that's generated should be owned by the user. So it's very clear that the tech platforms themselves do not want to own your output.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's great. But from a practical legal perspective, that actually doesn't sit very comfortably with our current laws around copyright, for example, at the moment here in the UK. So that's still governed by the Copyright Designs and Patents Act, 1988, way before AI was thought about. And what that says in terms of when copyright is created, it has to be created based on originality and some kind of human element, an element of skill, judgment, and effort. And so there is a technical argument that the machine, the model, and the combination of the prompting of that is not actually human skill, judgment, and effort, and therefore the output may not be even protected by copyright here in the UK.
Interesting.
So there is a rub, some friction when, for example, if you were designing something like code or some content of some kind, and it wouldn't, you know, in your contract with your clients, you would normally say, oh yeah, everything we develop for you, you know, if it's bespoke and it looks like you and it looks like your brand, you know, you can own it, and we would normally assign that. We may license it, but on the whole, you know, you would probably assign in that type of situation. It's actually difficult to do that because we, as the creator using AI tools, don't really know at the moment whether we've actually created something that's protected by copyright. So there is, you know, that's causing a little bit of tension in, for example, production type agreements. So where we're creating immersive content, where we're creating other forms of marketing, PR content for clients, you know, that's causing a little bit of some negotiation to be had in those types of contracts at the moment.
Interesting.
So I think for businesses, if you want to, if you are creative, if you know your team, if you've done your good governance and you've picked your models, your AI tools that the team are going to be allowed to use, and you've kind of ranked them and you've gone, yeah, look, we've done our audit, you know, we've reviewed the T's and C's, we've had the lawyers look at them, we've got our AI policies in place, we've done our training, you know, we're pretty good to go. I think, you know, one of the other decisions that businesses should be thinking about is, where are those tools going to be used? And if we're looking at using those tools to generate something that's really valuable, really proprietary to a business, you may want to just hold off, or, you know, consider the fact that that output may not be at the moment technically protected by copyright. So, you know, just need to give that some thought. If you're using the tools for, you know, running reports, for crunching data, for preparing for podcasts, probably care less about that.
Yeah, no, that's what, as you were talking about that, sort of translating that into how we're most likely to use it in the finance department.
Yeah.
And it is about, you know, actually getting data, making sense of it, analysing it, and producing sort of reports more efficiently than it's currently capable of doing. But I would imagine in that regard, it's probably reasonably safe, subject to the point about client data not being shared with the model.
Yes, and just also about, if you have a contract with a client which is relates to the work you're creating through an AI tool, so the output of your AI tool, if you're intending to give it to a client and the client is expecting to 100% own the copyright in that, and you've got a contract which warrants that you're assigning that and gives it indemnities that if they're sued as a result of a third-party infringement claim, that you'll stand behind that. You may want to look at that, because that's probably something that we would feel less comfortable about at the moment, based on the copyright position, and based on also the fact that those AI tools, although they say they're very happy for that, they want the user to own the output, what they don't do is say that the output won't infringe any third-party rights. So where, you know, if we were in a production environment or a development environment and we were creating some software, you know, all our coders would be sitting in the room doing this, you know, as long as they haven't gone and copied someone's code from anywhere, you know, we're really confident as a business that we own that, because, you know, it's original work, it's human input, it's skill and judgment exercised, and we know they've not copied someone else's. So we're like, yeah, fine, as a business, we can stand behind that. Now we're in a situation where we've got code that's come in, or we've got images or content, got no idea where that's really come from, because no one's looking under the bonnet. So, you know, we're starting to see discussions in contracts and renegotiations of contracts where we're providing a service or a product around that IP position. Firstly, are we allowed to use AI tools? Do you want us to use AI tools in stuff that we're creating for you? And then secondly, okay, well then if we are, what's the liability position there? And just revisiting that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, you've touched on this a bit, but in terms of business owners checking the small print before their teams start using these tools at scale, what else? We talked about like the training the model bit. Is there anything else in the small print that we need to understand?
Yeah, the liability piece, I think, as well. Often there's terms in there that say that, you know, if you're making publicly available any of the outputs, you've got to say it's been generated by AI. So there's often some sort of, you know, sort of unique little bits in those terms that I think businesses should be aware of. The key one is really around the liability, you know, that risk, hallucination risk, that bias risk, that does it infringe third-party IP risk, is thinking, okay, how do we manage the fact that it's not been created by Bob previously, and we knew that Bob understands all of those things. You know, how do we then potentially need to revisit our contracts with our customers and our clients to manage that liability perspective. So yeah, I mean, what we're seeing sensible clients do is allowing their business to have a play internally with lots of different tools, but that when they want to use tools for any kind of work, then that's generally, you know, it's sensible to refer that up to a body of sensible people who would then say, okay, you know, we're going to create a red, amber, green list of tools that can be used across the business, and those that are green everyone can use. We've either, you know, signed up for them on an enterprise basis, or we've reviewed the terms, but you can use them for X, Y, and Z kind of processes or use cases. And then amber ones that are being currently reviewed, and red are the absolutely don't go there at all kind of situation. So, that's sort of just an easy governance that can take place. And reviewing the terms are definitely something that needs to happen. And obviously that's quite, can be a costly exercise if you're doing that for a number of tools regularly. So I think, if you're using tools particularly for outputs for clients, I think what we're seeing is that actually we need to keep that quite narrow, because it will impact on the contracts with clients that you've entered.
I'm assuming it's cheating if you get ChatGPT to summarize its terms and conditions for you.
Well, I suppose, and it's this whole thing of, should AI, is AI going to take the job of lawyers? Is AI going to take the job of accountants? For sure, it can do loads of stuff, but generally I think you go to a lawyer or an accountant so that the answer's right.
Yeah.
and
I know.
if you're asking it something that you don't know whether it's right or not.
I mean,
So
that
I
is
think
the rub, isn't it? Yeah.
I think there's use it within your sphere of excellence is where I feel comfortable. If I can check it, I know whether it's right or wrong, and it definitely can speed me up. So yeah, I mean, I think it can do a good job of summarizing the difference between the T's and C's, but I mean, who wants a summary of a contract? You actually want someone who's read it, don't you? And then worked out, how do I need to behave differently because we're using AI as part of our work stream. So yeah, that would probably be the key things.
It's amazing though how they've developed over the last. I mean, I've only been using Claude in the last sort of month or so, but ChatGPT I've been using for a couple of years, and it's just changed so much over those 2 years. Although interestingly, I was watching a YouTube video the other day which talked about how ChatGPT, you still, if you ask it a simple question, it will go back to like one of its earlier versions. So you kind of almost want to make it more complicated so it accesses the more recent one. I've noticed, and you get better answers obviously with the more recent version than you do with the earlier version. So
and again, I think that it's down to which if you're paying for the enterprise version, you're going to be getting the latest model, and therefore the data is more up to date, as opposed to some of the older models where the data is 6 months out of date or what have you. So again, it depends what you're using it for, isn't it? It's if you're uploading data to it and asking it to crunch that data only, then the earlier models are probably fine. But well,
you say that ChatGPT was still very good at getting the numbers the wrong way around, and you had to go for it with a fine-tooth comb, whereas now certainly Claude, it can do a three-way financial model. It won't necessarily have all the assumptions correct, and it won't necessarily be sort of able to change the assumptions that easily, but it is quite impressive how that has totally dominated in terms of the number side of things versus ChatGPT.
Yeah, I don't know, and that's interesting as to where they're getting their kind of specialisms as well, isn't it, in terms of their use cases. And I suppose the only other thing to think about from a business perspective is around professional indemnity insurance.
Yes.
So all of these models, depending on which one you pick, can do incredible things. But it's back to that point we were just talking about of, if you go to a lawyer, you're going to a lawyer because you want a contract that's going to work. You're going to a lawyer because you want the lawyer to think about, well, if it doesn't work, then what? And if this happens, then what? And equally, if you're going to an accountant, you want to know that the amount that you've set aside for tax or that you're paying for tax is the right figure, and you're not suddenly going to get some horrendous, shock next year, for example. So I think, lawyers, accountants have professional indemnity insurance should they make a mistake. ChatGPT Claude doesn't.
Yeah.
So, those T's and C's will say their liability is capped at, 100 quid, nothing essentially, or whatever you've paid for it or whatever. So if those numbers are the wrong way around and you've relied on them and that's become baked into something in your finance model or in your operation processes, or in your contracts, your legal contracts, and or it's meant you've omitted to do something else that a sensible lawyer would have advised you to do, that can have a big consequence. And OpenAI and Anthropic, etc., are not going to be interested in that for you. Whereas lawyers, accountants will have professional indemnity insurance to support in that situation.
No, agreed. And so you've touched on some of this, but just sort of if we can summarize it, if a board was to say, right, we need to get on top of our AI risk, what would a sensible government framework actually look like, would you say, in practice?
Yeah, well, I think getting across where AI is currently being used across the business, so in which departments, which divisions, and for what purposes as well. And what those tools are. So getting that data, and probably having a few key people that are responsible for that across the business. Because I think what we've seen is that if it's scattergun, that can be quite chaotic. And then having a central group of people who are champions, so they're encouraging the innovation, but they're encouraging that sort of governance around what are we using, that it's new tools are proposed, and where they're going to be used, how they're going to be used, and that those T's and C's are checked, and that perhaps there's conditions applied to those particular tools such that they're only approved for certain use cases, that is just centrally managed somewhere. I think that's the key piece, so that it's embedded across the business from the inventive creative side, but also to make sure that from a contractual liability perspective as well, sensible risks are being taken.
And then doing like your red, amber, green thing as well, I guess.
Yeah. So that's what we do when we were analysing the tools. And we'd take a look at the tools and think, are these T's and C's appropriate for the business? Are they appropriate for where the tool is likely to be used within the business? And are they appropriate given the output that could be generated from those tools and what that output is going to be used for? And then that being the tools being put in one of those three categories, really. And that needs to keep being reviewed as well, because different bits of functionality come in, the terms change. So it's not dissimilar in terms of how we probably slightly governed the use of open source many years ago. So tech businesses would have, software developers started to use open source, and there was a little bit the Wild West. Then there was certain tech businesses now that are massive advocates of open source that would never have let it in their organization. But so sensible governance had to be put in place around the use of open source, and now it's every day. But it's just looking at it from a practical perspective, and I think good training as well. I think ongoing training, and listening to perhaps AI champions across the business, from juniors right through. That's so important, because I think that's where we've seen some of the really innovative, creative change happen. And that's what we want to see businesses capitalize on, is that that sort of gem of an idea of crikey, if we did this and this at that part of the business, we could be so much more efficient. So I think allowing that ongoing creativity, but perhaps fed up to a central sort of governance structure, some kind of board or something, is really important. And then I suppose the other piece is just keeping an eye on that ongoing legislation, particularly if that's relevant to your sector. So whether that's because you've got some proprietary IP, and therefore we're interested in how AI is impacting on that copyright piece. Or maybe it's because we want to be using it around our own IP, and we're a little bit nervous about doing that at the moment. Or whether it's because it's impacting, there's learnings to be had or best practice to be had around cybersecurity as well, because I think that's going to be the next big wake up call. Is AI is being used already to make those cyber incidents much more complex, and much there's just lots more of them happening. And so I think that sort of best practice around AI and cyber incidents is going to be another thing that boards are going to need to be taking very seriously.
You mentioned just then about using sort of more junior member staff and coming up with ideas of like, do this, this, and this, and that could, impact the efficiency of the business without sort of breaching confidentiality. Can you give an example of something, a use case? Because it's people like me included, like I just want to understand use cases of this, in terms of like how businesses are actually, putting it into their organizations.
Yeah, cool. So I suppose, we're at Keystone Law. We're we've got our own internal AI tool, but we have access to a number of tools that are out there, well-known sort of legal tools as well. In terms of our own tool, they're constantly innovating around those prompts. So, there was a big sort of consideration around, prompt libraries and the value of those. And I suppose for those in the professional services sector, that's something that I think, for sure is going to be really valuable. So, saving time on creating certain repeat tasks and then tracking the prompts that you use to create that financial spreadsheet or create a contract or a due diligence exercise, which can be really complex, and you think you've done a really good job of the first one, and then once you finish that deal, you just put it away. Well, actually harness that, gather that in, and then create a prompt library that will help you as a really good starting point for the next one. That's a huge amount of efficiencies there. I suppose I'm always thinking about clients and what they can be doing. So I think Playbooks, creating content that AI can then interrogate to create outputs for clients so they can do more. So working with a lot of high growth tech businesses, and what we've done is we create their suite of contracts for them. They're obviously always trying to keep their use of lawyers down and do as much as they can in-house. And so then we create them a bespoke playbook based on what we know their risk appetite is and what it should be, and what we know their types of customers will agree or want in contract negotiations. And then AI can help them. We've trained the AI on that playbook, if you like, those bumpers, and then AI can help them do the first flush of a redraft of a contract by saying, oh, your client wants to be able to terminate on 12 months notice, but you normally want 24 months, that's okay. So it's enabling that first flush of a redraft to be sort of done more internally. So I'm loving doing working on things like that, because although it means, yes, they're not going to be coming to us for that first flush of a draft, it doesn't matter. We just get they come to us when they've got
for the final
an almost final, exactly, can you sanity check the last 20%, or we're stuck on X, Y, and Z, can you come into the negotiations now and help us negotiate that? So
ultimately it means you'll probably service more clients because you can do it more efficiently, but hopefully you also get them to be more sticky with you because they've kind of got that loyalty of you, like giving them the ability to get it so far. So yeah, I think that's quite a smart move, to be fair.
And I think that's about engaging with clients, and the nice bit about what I do is that often they are quite innovative clients. They're constantly hungry to do things in different ways, and they're often quite tech savvy, so they're really happy to, often they can come to you with solutions like that. So it's about exactly integrating with them, and just getting that balance right, because I think that personal edge is still really important. So when we build those playbooks, I mean, you could just do that as a really generic, but actually the value is about you talking about risk and talking about where people sit on that risk spectrum and what are the implications for that particular business. And that will be different as from a manufacturing business to production business to a marketing agency to some kind of data business. So it's all about sort of them building that bespoke for them, and that's that human element that I don't think we're gonna I don't think AI will take that away. But you're absolutely right, it is changing the way we provide services, and we need to integrate that. I'm just trying to think of some other good examples of
An
where we've
example
using.
that, yeah, with one of our clients is they do a lot of tenders, so it's actually about training. I think in that particular example is ChatGPT with all of the case studies of where they've done stuff, and then it can then pull on that data, and it's like it's sped up the process significantly each time that they have like a tender that comes in. So yeah.
Yeah, so they've trained the model on that historic tender data, and
Exactly.
absolutely.
Which is
And then you can start doing really smart things then, can't you? Because you can then start doing, okay, we won that, we didn't win that, and feeding that, that output in back in to say, okay, if you pitch at this percent, or pitch at these levels, you're 99% likely to win based on historic wins as well. So you can keep adding to that. So yeah, that's really smart. I think this sovereign piece is it, for me, is where a lot of the value is. And I think we're seeing a lot of clients use it from an efficiency perspective. So whether that's testing of coding, or whether it's helping with pitches or copy or marketing information or what have you, that's kind of that is the bread and butter almost, isn't it? But I think that sovereign piece around what is it that we as a business have, whether it's IP, whether it's your special source, or whether it's something that you want to create in the future, how can we start harnessing that into a model and training from that, or creating stuff from that? That's where I think it's that for me is the next iteration. So law firms that have done very unique deals in multiple countries that not many law firms have done, well, that's valuable. Training your model on that, then you become an expert in all of those jurisdictions, and your team become experts in those jurisdictions as well. So I think that's super interesting. And I suppose businesses that have started to think like that, for me, are steps ahead. And that can be around ingredients, that can be around recipes, that can be around lots of different things. But it's about harnessing the IP that you've got, or the special sauce that you've got, or the methodologies that you've got, and saying, okay, where now can we deploy this that perhaps we couldn't before? And or can we scale because we can train others on that special source that only a small team of people had previously.
No, it's fascinating, isn't it? I love it, but yeah, also scares the life out of me as well. So every
Yeah,
so often I just want to get in a camper van and leave it all behind.
But I mean, I think it's embedded in everything now as well, isn't it? I think that's the other piece. And, we've talked about using kind of AI tools as a one-off, but actually, what you're finding is it's embedded in presumably your finance software as well. I mean, it's embedded in Canva, and it's embedded in Salesforce, and it's embedded all over. So it is, it's getting harder to escape. And I suppose it's also getting harder to see what those T's and C's are, where they are as well. Sometimes that requires quite a lot of effort. But I don't think it's going to mean we're out of jobs. I just think our jobs are going to be changing. And hopefully you may have a bit more time to go off in that camper van.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Just one final question. Obviously, just wanting to take it back to sort of finance. What is the one thing every finance director should be sort of taking away from today's chat?
I think it's absolutely right to be very cognizant of the risk of hallucinations, of bias, of getting it wrong, of risk of confidential data being put in there, or putting in data that you don't have the rights to put into an AI tool in some way, and of the risk of that then cascading, that then leads to other stuff. So I think, caution is sensible, a sensible governance practice around where you're using tools across the business, why, for what purpose, like we've talked about, and then some sensible policies and training around that as well. I think the other piece is perhaps around legal privilege, which we haven't touched on. It's something that we're starting to see impact on some court cases recently, and essentially that is the situation where between client and a lawyer, you have on the whole what's called legal privilege, which means if a business is in a potentially contentious situation, a dispute perhaps with its client or a supplier or an employee, and it comes to me for legal advice, what we talk about, what we share is legally privileged. And you may not need to disclose legally privileged stuff in the course of a court case, because some of that legally privileged stuff might be adverse to you, and that's kind of right and proper. It gives you the right to legal representation. But if you put some of that legal stuff, so maybe it's some advice, maybe it's meeting notes of a meeting or something, into an AI tool, we still don't know yet whether that is making something public, and therefore it would lift the lid on that legal privilege, and that data wouldn't be privileged anymore. So that is another sort of risk element that I think perhaps FDs are more likely to be coming across, because they're more likely to be managing those types of contentious situations. And of course, where we have seen it really play out badly is where a business has done that to someone else's data. So it's had a really catastrophic impact because it wasn't their data to lift the lid on. So, maybe you have multiple businesses involved in a contentious dispute, and you might be, you and your client might be in an action against a supplier, could have a long supply chain. And in that situation, if one party has, put some data about the case into ChatGPT and it's not closed, and even if it is closed, we don't know yet whether that is disclosure or not, that could lift the lid on that privileged bit of information for everyone that you're in the dispute with. So that's probably something that I think would be easy to overlook unless you are a contentious, you're sort of a contentious lawyer or something, and you're in that situation all the time. So again, that's just, as part of that governance around when should we be using AI tools and for what purpose, one of the things you should consider, and perhaps should be in your rules, should be something around, if this matter could become contentious in any way, you shouldn't be putting that data into any form of AI tool. That would probably be the approach I would take at the moment, to exercise extreme caution there.
And you're saying that even if you've got the do not train the model thing on, you're saying
I think
it's
so,
still
until
a risk,
we've got really, really clear guidance from the courts. And we've had a few things which have given indications, but until we've got really, really clear guidance on that, yes, I wouldn't risk that at the moment.
Okay. Well, thank you, Rebecca. You've answered a lot of questions and you've also put even more doubt in my mind. So
It's all fine.
it's all fine. Yeah, no, it's all good. But no, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And yeah, if anyone wants to get in contact, Rebecca is active on LinkedIn. You'll easily find her on there. But yeah, thank you so much.